Mom called my baby ugly at her birthday party, so I cut ties and erased her from every photo. Now she's crying on Facebook, playing the victim. My daughter Lily's first birthday was meant to be soft and forgettable in all the best ways, like a warm breeze in June or the fragrance of cake that lingers on your fingers long after the last mouthful has been eaten. It was a small gathering of family and neighbors in the backyard, with mismatched folding chairs pushed into the lawn. Paper plates crumbled under store-bought cupcakes, and kids shrieked aimlessly. It was the kind of day you wouldn't write a sonnet about, but you would post a few grainy photos online with a message like, "Can't believe she's won already," and then move on. I had no intention of remembering it permanently, at least not in the way that I do now. Lily was dressed in a pale yellow romper with a stitched bumblebee on the breast, and one shoe went missing within the first 20 minutes. My husband Michael stood beside me, awkwardly holding her as we sang "Happy Birthday" too slowly, too loudly. My sister Chloe cracked a joke about our tone-deaf family, and everyone laughed a little too hard, since that's what we do. We overcompensate. The air smelled of plastic forks, citronella candles, and charred hamburgers. It should have been a great day. Then my mother arrived, late as usual, with a gift too enormous for the occasion, wrapped in shiny gold paper, as if we were celebrating a royal coronation rather than a baby smearing icing into her own eye socket. Eleanor never knew how to read a room. All she knew was how to walk in and adjust the temperature. She kissed Lily's head without looking at her, then turned to face me, smiling with her lips, but not her eyes. "You look tired," she murmured, just loud enough for Chloe to notice. "Still carrying that baby weight, huh?" I laughed quickly and instinctively because I'd spent my entire life trying not to react when she cut. Michael tried to divert her attention by asking if she wanted a burger or something to drink, but she waved him away like a fly. She seemed overly focused on surveying the party, as if inspecting a battlefield. The incident occurred as we were attempting to convince Lily to blow out her single candle. Everyone was crowded around the small table, phones out, voices mingling with feigned eagerness. I leaned in close, smiling, and braced Lily's small fingers as she reached for the flame. Then my mother leaned down, her lips almost next to my ear, and said, "She's going to grow up ugly like you." I didn't turn to look at her. I didn't even blink. I literally froze there mid-smile, one hand on my daughter's small wrist, the other gripping my phone as if it were about to burst. The candle flickered. Lily produced a sneeze-like sound, and the flame went out. Everyone applauded. The moment had passed, but I hadn't. Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep and the last of the icing had been scraped from the patio, I sat on the couch browsing through images as if looking for something specific. I didn't know what, not at first. Then I found it. It was fuzzy and overexposed. My face was slightly tilted, my mouth in that strange half-smile you get when you're about to laugh, but something feels off. My mother was in the corner of the shot, just visible behind my shoulder. Her face was near mine, lips curved like a hook, eyes focused. She resembled a different woman. Nobody else in the shot seemed to notice her. They were all concentrating on Lily, but I saw it. I saw her. I sat there staring at the photo for too long. Michael entered from the kitchen, drying his hands with a towel. "Looking through the shots?" he inquired. "Yeah," I answered without moving. "That one's cute," he added, referring to a photo of Lily with frosting in her hair. But I didn't show him the other one. I didn't say anything. I merely saved it quietly in a folder labeled evidence, all uppercase. The issue with mothers like mine is that they make you wonder whether your memories are your own or hers. She had a way of twisting things. So, I wasn't sure if I was overreacting or simply underhealing. But this time, I had proof. I had a snapshot of the exact moment my brain said enough. That was the first picture I removed her from. I opened my editing app, the same one kids used to smooth their skin and whiten their teeth, and I started small. I cropped her out. I removed her shadow. Then I went on to group photographs, specifically backyard photos. The one where she is sitting near the grill. The one where she's holding Lily but not truly holding her. Arms stiff as if the infant were made of knives. Delete. Crop. Painted over it. It became addictive, like cleaning a wound you were unaware was still bleeding. The following day, I printed 10 of my best photos and displayed them in Lily's room. Every single one of them beautiful, bright, cheerful, and devoid of Eleanor. Chloe messaged me a few days later. "Hey, where's the picture of Mom holding Lily?" "The one from the cake didn't come out," I replied, which was technically correct. That night, I had a dream about a family portrait, but whenever I tried to smile, my mother would lean in and mutter something, causing my face to crumble like wet paper. I awoke with a scorching determination in my chest. I wasn't going to let Lily grow up hearing the same poison I had. I wasn't going to wait for the next party, photo, or whispered slur masquerading as truth. I wasn't going to let my mother write herself into my daughter's story the way she did mine, with a harsh tongue and a crooked smile. And if she didn't want to love Lily properly, she wouldn't love her at all. I took out my phone and began looking through every album, memory, and location my mother had ever touched in digital form, and I started erasing her, image by image, word by word, memory by memory, because revenge doesn't always have to be overt. Sometimes it's just a quiet delete. That was just where I started. There's a distinction between forgetting someone and determining they don't deserve to be remembered. I didn't truly comprehend it until I was standing in my laundry room, folding a pair of baby socks that didn't even match, and remembered how my mother used to call me thick around the middle when I was 12. Not with malice, at least not in a way most people could see, but with a tiny tilt of her voice, as if she were diagnosing a problem that she believed would only worsen. She wasn't wrong. It did. Not my weight, but how I carried myself. By age 16, she had upgraded the insult. Plain, she'd reply, sometimes in passing, sometimes in the middle of a conversation, as if she were doing me a favor by saying it out loud before anyone else could. I recall brushing my hair the night before prom, holding the curling iron too long on one strand until it sizzled, and hearing her through the cracked door exclaim, "She's just forgettable. Maybe it's the eyes." As if I weren't right there, as if I weren't trying to obliterate myself faster than she could. At 22, I told her I wanted to relocate across the country, start anew, and possibly go to graduate school. She didn't flinch. She simply muttered, "You were probably a mistake anyway," as if reading it from a grocery list. I didn't cry. I just nodded, because what else can you do when someone tells you the truth like that? You either let it soak into your bones or spit it out before it sticks. I let it settle for years. But now I have Lily. And something about becoming a mother makes you want to either shield your child from the world or expose her to it, piece by agonizing piece. I picked protection because I knew how sharp the initial cut could be, and I'd rather she were naive than quietly bleeding before she learned to speak. So, I dug deeper than photos. I dug up the old flash drives, cloud backups, and printed albums buried in drawers I hadn't touched in years. Eleanor, my mother, was posing next to me at my wedding with a tight-lipped smirk, as if she were watching a slow-motion calamity. I opened the image in an editor and meticulously painted her out. It took 10 minutes. 10 minutes to remove decades of her standing too near me, clutching me as if she were allergic to warmth. Gone. I glanced at the photo afterward. The space she had occupied was now filled with light and air. It looked better without her. Then I moved on to the Christmas of 3 years ago, when she informed me that if I didn't cut back on the salt, Lily would most likely be born cross-eyed. She said it with a giggle, fork halfway to her mouth. I nodded, too tired to fight. Now, she was no longer in the background of the photograph, replaced by the glow of the tree and Chloe's toddler throwing a plastic ornament at the cat. I erased her from a total of 24 photos, which is unusual given that we only had 13 guests at the party, but she managed to insert herself into every situation, as if she were certain that no moment went by without her involvement. Chloe was the first to notice. She texted me 2 days after I published the revised album online. "Where's Mom in these pics? Did she leave early?" I composed and deleted my response 3 times before settling on. She must have stepped out when those were taken. Technically, this wasn't a lie. Spiritually, perhaps. Michael took notice next. He didn't say anything right away, but gave me the slow, deliberate look he saves for when he's deciding whether to hug me or propose therapy. Finally, during supper, he asked, "Are you sure this is the road you want to go down?" I gazed at Lily, cheeks full of mashed peas, face plastered with love and innocence, and said, "I'm already halfway there." What I didn't mention was this. If I had a time machine, I wouldn't go back and stop myself from doing this. I'd go back even further and eliminate Eleanor from every birthday, every dance recital, every time I stood in front of a mirror and despised what I saw because she had given me the means to express that hatred. Late that night, I was scrolling through my phone in the dark when I noticed the message notification flash up. One line, No greeting. Why am I blocked from your daughter's baby album? I stared at it for so long the screen darkened. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She knew why. She just didn't want to admit it. And to be honest, part of me was waiting to see whether she'd send another message, call, or even show up as if nothing had happened, pretending I was the dramatic one, like I'd always misunderstood her, like her comments were never daggers, but just innocent little remarks. But she didn't follow up. She didn't push because she must have known, deep down in that cruel little heart of hers, that I wasn't flinching this time. This time, I was cutting. And this time, she wasn't coming back. There's a type of vengeance that doesn't involve broken glass or shouted voices. One that doesn't result in bruises, shredded clothes, or tire marks in a driveway. It comes on slowly, like poison in a cup of tea, something tasting almost sweet before it makes you ill. And when done correctly, no one can trace it back to you. That's how I began dealing with my mother. As if she were a silent infection, I was finally treating after years of pretending I wasn't ill. Yes, it started with the photographs, but it didn't end there. Removing her face from photos was just the beginning. Underneath the surface, the rot permeated everything she'd touched, and I wasn't finished digging it out yet. First, I removed her from the family calendar Michael and I used to keep track of birthdays, appointments, preschool visits, medical checkups, and holidays. I removed her email address from the invitation list. I deleted all the events she'd previously been invited to. I wiped away the recurring reminders of her presence. Then, I changed the location for Lily's daycare picnic and only shared the new details with people I trusted not to pass it on. When Chloe asked why the address had changed, I explained they were having plumbing issues. That was enough to satisfy her. Nobody questions logistics when it involves babies. Everyone assumes the chaos belongs somewhere else. Michael was watching me out of the corner of his eye, like a man watching a woman who started carrying a knife, unsure if she's defending herself or planning something worse. One night, while Lily slept and I lay on the couch retouching another old photo, he asked, "Are you going to tell her?" I didn't look up from my screen. Tell who what? He gave me the weary look I'd come to expect, the one that screamed, "Don't play dumb, Jenna. Not with me." So I closed my laptop and met his eyes. "Are you going to tell your mother why you're cutting her out of everything?" I didn't respond right away. There was too much to say, and none of it would come out the way I needed it to. So I just shook my head. "She doesn't deserve closure," I finally said. "She never gave me any." And that was the most honest thing I'd said aloud in months. I didn't get closure when she told me I was prettier before my adult teeth came in. I was 10 years old, standing in our hallway in a new pink dress, beaming because I finally had sleeves that weren't stretched out hand-me-downs. She glanced at me and said, "You used to be cute before those teeth." She treated me like some broken doll she no longer wanted. I didn't find closure when she mocked me for crying at my own graduation or told me no man would ever marry someone so emotional. And I didn't get closure when she claimed Lily would grow up to be ugly like me. So, no, she wasn't getting courteous phone calls. She wasn't getting a formal announcement. She would figure it out the same way the world often does, through absence. Absence, however, carries its own weight. It fills a room like smoke, slow and undetectable at first, then suffocating once you realize you waited too long to move. She must have felt it too because less than a week after I excluded her from the picnic, she showed up on my doorstep. It was a late Thursday afternoon. The light was softening, and the scent of sun-warmed mulch drifted up from the flower beds I hadn't touched since spring. Lily was playing with a bucket of toy blocks on the floor, humming to herself in that delightful nonsense language toddlers use before words make sense. Then the doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I opened it. Eleanor stood there clutching a gift bag that looked like it came from an expensive downtown boutique, complete with glittering handles and ribbon instead of wrapping paper. She wore that frozen half-smile she used when she wanted to appear warm but lacked the energy. "I'll give her this." She didn't start with a question, an apology, or even a joke. She simply said, "Thought I'd drop this by for Lily." I stayed in the doorway, not moving aside. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. Inside, Lily stopped humming. She looked up toward the door, then back down at her blocks, as if something in her little mind registered as wrong. Eventually, I let Eleanor in, more from morbid curiosity than grace. She tried to approach Lily cautiously, crouching beside her and holding out the bag like some wicked fairy godmother offering curses disguised as candy. But Lily didn't approach her. She didn't even smile. She just glanced at Eleanor for a few long seconds before turning back to her blocks and picking up a green one, as if the moment had already passed her by. I saw my mother's face flicker with confusion, the corners of her mouth sagging just slightly, not enough for most people to notice. But I knew every line on her face, every crack in her armor. She waited for Lily to respond, for that innate childhood instinct to reach for a familiar adult, but it never came. In that moment, something sharp and final clicked into place inside me, because even babies know when love isn't real. I took the gift bag from her hands without a word, placed it on the table without looking inside, and said the only thing that needed saying, "I think it's time for you to leave." She didn't argue. She didn't yell. She just nodded once and turned, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she walked out of the house, like she had somewhere more important to be. But she didn't. Not anymore. I wasn't burning the house down with her in it. I was just making sure she never got a key again. I always assumed that if anyone was going to back me up, really step forward and say, "Yes, she did that. I saw it too. She said those things," it would be my sister. Chloe was the one who experienced it alongside me, who grew up in the same tense house with the same oppressive rules and cold silences that lingered too long. She was there when our mother called me dramatic for crying at Dad's funeral and then pulled Chloe into the kitchen to whisper, "Thank God it wasn't you, sweetheart." I couldn't handle that. She was there when Eleanor would criticize my appearance before turning to Chloe with a smile, so warm you'd swear it belonged to a different person. We used to laugh about it in our 20s, lying on the floor of my apartment with cheap wine and takeout, calling her Jekyll and hide behind her back when we felt brave enough. But we never dug deeper. We never asked why Chloe received the gold while I got the gravel. So when she eventually texted, "Can we talk?" I knew what was coming. The hesitation, the confusion, the inevitable, "Maybe you're taking this too far." Even though I'd braced myself, I still felt that familiar knot tighten in my stomach, the same one I'd get as a kid when Eleanor called my name from another room in that tone, the one that made you instantly question what you'd done wrong, even when you'd done nothing. Chloe arrived with coffee in hand, a tense look on her face as though she were trying hard not to frown, but couldn't quite manage it. She didn't sit down right away, instead hovering near the kitchen counter as if unsure she wanted to stay long. I waited for her to speak first because I knew how this worked. She needed to feel in control of the narrative. "You've been editing her out of everything," she finally said. Her words were cautious and slow, as if softening them might hide the judgment they carried. I nodded, leaning against the counter. "Yes, I have." She hesitated before adding, "Isn't that a bit much?" That's when I decided to show her the photograph. I'd kept it, printed it, despite promising myself I was done with Eleanor. But this wasn't for her, it was for proof. I slid it across the counter to Chloe. It was the photo from Lily's birthday. Everyone else clapping and celebrating, while Eleanor leaned into my ear, her mouth twisted as if spitting poison. She said Lily would grow up ugly. I told Chloe directly. Like me. Chloe stared down at the photograph, silent for a long time. I watched her eyes scan the edges, the faces, the frozen moment of me mid-smile, my body visibly stiffening. I waited for the denial, the deflection, the "you must have misheard her." But it didn't come, not right away. Instead, she said, almost too quietly, "I thought you looked happy in this one." I shook my head slowly, exhausted. "Did you really think I was?" She didn't answer. That silence seemed to crack something in her. Not completely. Not enough to mend the trust between us, but enough for her to consider that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't making it up. That maybe all those years I was called the sensitive one, the fragile one, the one with too much emotion and not enough humor. Maybe I was just the one telling the truth before anyone was ready to hear it. Then the bomb dropped. That night, Eleanor made a Facebook post. Not a private message, not a phone call, but a public status update for all her friends, neighbors, elderly church ladies, former co-workers, and barely remembered high school acquaintances to see. It read, "My daughter has poisoned my relationship with my granddaughter. Please pray for me during this difficult time." Some people don't realize what family means until it's too late. It was shared 17 times within the first hour. Comments started pouring in. People sending hugs and prayers, sharing anecdotes about their own children becoming cold or entitled. Some even mentioned forgiveness. One woman wrote, "You're still her mother. Don't give up on her yet." I read it all in stunned silence, sitting in my dark kitchen, the phone's light searing my eyes. My hands shook with a mix of rage, humiliation, and something else I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was grief for the tiny part of me that still wished she might someday say, "I was wrong. You didn't deserve that." But she never would. Instead, she'd gone nuclear. I considered leaving the post unanswered, letting her wallow in her public martyrdom while I stayed silent. But then I realized silence was what had kept me shackled for so long. Silence was her weapon. Saying nothing in response to her cruelty, pretending uncomfortable memories didn't exist, expecting me to swallow every insult like communion. So I broke the silence with a single comment below her post. Just one sentence. "You should pray for the daughter in that photo. She doesn't exist anymore." By morning, there were over 200 comments. Some defended her, some supported me, but the ones that cut deepest were simply asking what had really happened. For once, she didn't control the narrative. Something shifted in that space of uncertainty, in the vacuum left by her carefully constructed lies. People didn't need to know everything. Maybe it was enough that she was no longer the only voice. After the final confrontation, an unusual quiet settles. The ranting stops, the social media dust settles, and the door you firmly closed behind someone no longer rattles. Not because they stopped pushing, but because they finally gave up. That was the quiet I woke up to the next morning. Coffee in hand, I watched Lily crawl across the living room carpet in her footy pajamas, mouth working on something invisible, little fingers batting at blocks that no longer lit up. The world felt quieter. Not peaceful, exactly, but hollowed out in a way I hadn't experienced before. It was the kind of quiet you find after gutting a house, when the floors still echo with the ghosts of what used to be there. I'd been thinking about the baby book for months, ever since Eleanor showed up with that gift bag and Lily shied away, as if her small body knew better than to let the poison in. Something clicked for me that day, something essential and final. It wasn't just about removing my mother from the present. It was about denying her access to the future, ensuring her shadow never fell across Lily's memories. Because children remember more than we think. They remember the tone of a voice, the tension in their mother's jaw, the way hands clench when the phone rings. I remembered. I remembered everything. And I refused to let Lily inherit that legacy of harm. So I started making my own, writing it by hand, which felt more permanent somehow, more sacred than typing. No pastel pages or generic prompts. Just a simple book, brown leather, thick paper, stitched binding. I wrote the story of Lily's beginning, her fingers curling around my thumb the first time she held it, the first time she laughed at the dog's wagging tail, her decided preference for sweet potatoes over carrots. I wrote about Michael assembling her crib late one night, muttering under his breath about confusing instructions, and about our debate over white noise versus silence while she slept. But I didn't write about Eleanor. Not once. Not as a footnote. Not as a background character. Not even as a name scribbled next to a list of gifts received. She was a ghost, and ghosts don't belong in baby books. Each page was a small act of rebellion. Each line inked onto the paper was my way of saying, "You don't get to live here anymore." Michael watched me working on it sometimes, silent. He didn't ask questions or offer suggestions. One evening, he came over while I was writing, took the finished book from my hands, and carefully placed it on the shelf above Lily's changing table, handling it as if it were sacred. And maybe it was. The next morning, Lily toddled over to that shelf, pointing with one chubby finger. She looked up at me, eyes wide and curious, and then uttered her first real sentence, not just a word, a whole sentence. "Nana gone." I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just smiled, knelt to her level, and said, "Yes, baby, she is." It wasn't unkind. It wasn't even bitter. It was just the truth, the simplest kind, the kind that needs no explanation. Because Eleanor hadn't just left our lives. I had made sure she couldn't return, not as a whisper, not as a distorted memory, not as a ghost pretending to be family. I hadn't killed my mother. I had simply erased the idea of her. For a while, that was enough. The quiet settled around us like fine dust on a windowsill. Michael and I started sleeping better. Chloe kept her distance, caught between embracing the silence and confronting it. I didn't push her either way. Eleanor's absence gave me space to breathe, and I had no desire to fill it with old regrets or fragile reconciliations. But 6 months later, a letter arrived. No return address. No postmark I recognized. Just my name on the envelope in handwriting I hadn't seen in years, not since my mother used to sign school permission slips with a long, irritated flourish. I thought about burning it. I even held it over the kitchen sink for a moment, trying to gauge if it felt thick enough to hold more than just paper. But I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Me at 13. No makeup, awkward braces, an oversized t-shirt, stringy hair pulled back in a ponytail. I was smiling. Not a posed smile, but a real one. Shy, hopeful, maybe a little embarrassed. The kind of smile that suggests the person behind the camera loved you. On the back, she'd scribbled a single sentence. You were never ugly. I just didn't know how to love pretty things. No apology. No explanation. Just that one sentence, a confession laced with cowardice. The truth, offered too late to matter and too early to forgive. I stared at the photo for a long time, not because I missed her or thought she'd changed, but because I wanted to remember the girl in it. I wanted to remember that despite everything, that girl still believed she was worth capturing, worth seeing. I didn't write back. I didn't call. I didn't post a reply. But I didn't throw the photograph away either. I kept it. Not for her. For me. To remember what I survived.